September, and I'll be teaching there on writing middle grade mysteries. And so that's one thing I know that for sure is happening.
Well, we definitely look forward to meeting you in person at Malice.
I really look forward to meeting you guys. I so enjoy your podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I really love it when you cast the books.
I guess we need to get back to that. We've kind of stopped doing that, but we've had other requests for that, so I think we're going to start including that again.
Cynthia, we thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to talk with us.
Oh, and thank you for inviting me.
And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll see you at Malice.
See you then.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Next up is our interview with Agatha nominee Edwin Hill. Edwin Hill is the author of the critically acclaimed Hester Thursby mystery series. His first novel, Little Comfort, was nominated for an Agatha Award for Best Debut and received starred reviews in Publishers Weekly and Booklist. The second in the series, The Missing Ones, will be available in September. During the day, he works as the Vice President and Editor-Director for Bedford St. Martin's, a division of Macmillan. He lives in Roslindale, Massachusetts, with his partner Michael and his favorite retriever, their lab Edith Ann, who likes his first drafts enough to eat them. Welcome, Edwin.
Who is an Agatha nominee for
the Hester Thursby mystery series, which I read. I didn't get a chance to read a lot of the nominees, but I did get a chance to read yours, and I absolutely loved it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
What was your reaction when you received the nomination?
Oh my gosh, I was thrilled. They're really nice down at Malice. They call each of the individual nominees to let them know before they're announced. So I got a call. I was at my partner's parents' house and I got a call, and for some reason I thought to take it. I don't even know why I thought to take it, because I wouldn't normally take a call when I was at someone's house. It was one of the people on the committee, and she let me know, and I was just absolutely thrilled. So I went out into the other room and I felt like I was glowing.
Yes, I can imagine.
What was your inspiration for Hester? She was a very interesting character.
Oh, sure. So this first book is called Little Comfort, and it's my first novel. So the book's nominated for Best First Novel. And I always say this, you sit with your first novel as long as you need to sit with it, because absolutely no one in the world is waiting for it. I had worked on this book for off and on. I didn't work on it very seriously until toward the end, but off and on I worked on it for about maybe 8 years. It went through a bunch of different incarnations, and Hester wasn't really even a character in it when I first started it, but I landed on her probably about after sort of fiddling with the story for about off and on for 2 years. I realized that I had started with the antagonist, who's a guy named Sam Blaine. I started with him as the main character, and I was trying to write a sort of like a Talented Mr. Ripley type story with the antagonist as the central character. And after I'd worked on it for a couple years and it wasn't quite working, I realized that he needed a foil. He needed someone who could sort of stand up to him, stand toe-to-toe with him. And so I landed on Hester as a character. And again, because I wasn't working on it full-time, or I wasn't working on it even all that seriously, it took me a while to get to a bunch of different conclusions. The thing that really took off for me, and this was sort of the moment when I realized I might actually have a real novel to work on, was when I decided that Hester has a partner. Her partner is a man named Morgan, and they've been dating for many years, and they live together in the same house, but they don't live in the same apartment. They live in separate apartments and sort of go between each other's apartments as needed. And that was just this very tiny telling detail about Hester as a character that helped me fill her out. It made it clear that she was very independent, but she was also very fearful of commitment, and she's fearful of being too committed to Morgan, even though they love each other very much. That was sort of when the story really took off, and then I started filling in other details about her as I worked on the story.
Well, that's great. I've heard that from other authors, that it almost sounds to me like Hester interjected herself into the story, like she felt she needed to be there.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started this novel many years ago, I wrote a scene with Sam Blaine, who's the antagonist. I wrote this scene. It was Sam sitting at a bar in Boston, contemplating leaving Boston. And I knew that he had done something bad and that he needed to leave town because he'd done it to someone. But I had no idea what those things were. And I really loved that scene. And I had tried writing another novel many years earlier. I'd actually gotten an agent for it. We shopped it around New York, and it just never went anywhere. So I wasn't fully committed emotionally to trying to be a writer. That scene, I would just revisit it every now and then. I'd pull it up on my computer, I'd read it, I'd think, oh, this is great. And then I'd shut my computer again. So it wasn't until I happened to get a little time off from work where I could spend a little time devoted to writing. That's when I really started to delve into what this story might actually be. That's sort of when I found Hester. And what my favorite thing about that story is that scene that I was so impressed with that I would visit every now and then, didn't make it into the final novel. It was just sort of this entry point into writing what this story wound up being. And the reason why it didn't make it into the story is because ultimately I had to decide as a writer whose story this was, and it was Hester's story. And so I had to cut away certain things that I held very dear. That scene didn't do anything to further her character, so I cut it.
Now, please tell me you're on work on the second one.
Oh, yes. The second one is called The Missing Ones, and it comes out in September. The only thing I'll say about it is anyone who reads Little Comfort, the first book, probably has a question about somebody. And I'll give you a hint. It's somebody who appears in the story but doesn't appear physically in the story. Anyone who reads the novel probably has a question about this character, and the second novel sets out to answer some of those questions.
Oh, interesting. I thought this book was so well put together and just so multi-leveled because you got to experience Hester as a mother figure, as a detective, as a girlfriend. She blew me away. I don't get to see characters like that very often in books, and kudos to you because she was great.
Oh, you're really kind to say that. I want to explore different things about her as a character. In this story, she has a 3-year-old child that she's responsible for. She isn't necessarily thrilled to have a 3-year-old child. It's not her own child. And part of the story is coming to terms with, having to, she's an adult. She knows that she's responsible for this kid, and she actually has to take care of the kid. She is an adult and knows that. But at the same time, she is not always happy about the fact that she's been put in this position. And part of the journey of the novel is just her coming to terms with life offers you different knocks, and sometimes you just have to take things that you don't necessarily want to. And I think by the end of the novel, she certainly has put through some tests. And by the end, I think she's come to terms with the position that she's been put in without really being asked.
Yeah, I don't know if I approve of her taking a 3-year-old into a bar.
A lot of people don't.
well, but I can see it, though, because since she was like a bulldog, she had a job to do. Yeah. And this child was her responsibility, so it went along with her.
I will tell you, I don't have kids, but I will tell you that parents who read this book think Hester is a very irresponsible parent at times.
At times, yes, but she is responsible because she's taking care of this poor little child whose mother just disappeared.
Well, Edwin, we've heard a lot about your books. Let's hear something about Edwin.
Oh, sure. Well, I work in the publishing industry. I'm actually the editorial director for a publisher of higher ed, Macmillan Learning, which is a really fun and really rewarding career. And so I wind up writing a lot on the side in the weekends and in the mornings. And so the nice thing about Hester is that I have a second book coming out in September, and then I'll have a third one in this series coming out the following September. And so right now, my life is really about finding balance, right, between my day job and my side gig and making sure that I'm able to really create good writing for Hester so that she can stay alive.
So in the second book, does Hester grow? Does she still have the child with her?
Yes. The second book takes place on an island off the coast of Maine. For anyone who has spent time in that area, it's based on an island called Monhegan Island, which is a really fascinating place. It's a very small island that was an artist colony for many, many years, and they don't allow cars there. So it's just really fun to go there. You go there and you feel like you've gone back in time.
I've been there, yes.
Oh, it's beautiful.
a lovely place.
So when I was writing the book, Monhegan is so specific. It's so tiny and so specific. And I needed to sort of change the landscape of it a little bit. So I just decided to make up a fake island and base it mostly on Monhegan, but it's actually a fictional place. So I call it Finisterre Island. So, and Hester goes there for a variety of reasons, and she gets herself in some more trouble.
Which I can just imagine.
And then the third book is, when I wrote the first book, actually, there was a storyline in it about a for-profit university. A for-profit university is a school like the University of Phoenix. It was about a for-profit university based in Boston that was sort of going down the tubes. And I wound up, during the editorial process, I wound up having to cut that storyline out of the novel because it just didn't work, actually, in that first novel. There was too much story going on in that first novel. So I cut quite a bit of the first novel, about 40% of the first novel, and then had to rewrite a lot of the pages. And so I saved that story because I always liked the story and I liked the main character that sort of drove the for-profit storyline. So I kept that, and I'm going to use that in the third book, where Hester sort of delved into what's going on at this school.
What about your original scene? Are you going to put that in one of your books?
I may. The first book is told from multiple points of view. And the three main characters are Hester. She's the dominant character. But then there are two other characters who have point of view scenes. One is a guy named Sam Blaine. He's a very handsome, charismatic person who sort of can shapeshift into different people's lives and he has a sidekick whose name is Gabe. And Gabe is sort of the antithesis of Sam. He is not charismatic, but he's ultimately a kind and caring person, though you may not think that at first. And both of them make poor decisions, let's put it that way. So I like these two characters, and part of me wants to try and write a novel about their backstory, the backstory that comes up in this story, and sort of maybe go backwards in time and explore that. And that's where I would use that scene.
You did give a little snippet of what their childhood was like, and it would be a great way to fill in the detail because it wasn't a very interesting story.
Yeah, they spend some time in San Francisco, and then there's some hints at time that they spent in Chicago or in Baltimore and New York. I think that might be something interesting to explore in the future. Right now, one book a year is about as much as I can do.
Well, now we know you're coming to Malice. Are there any other events you would like our listeners to know about?
Well, I'll be going out to Left Coast Crime, which I think is in 3 weeks. That's going to be in Vancouver. And I also, in the fall, I'll be going to BoucherCon, which is in Dallas this year. So I'm really looking forward to both of those. Then in September, I'll have a bunch of events around the launch of the second book. A lot of them will be here in Massachusetts, but there may be a few others. But you can always check out my website. It's edwin-hill.com. And there's a space there around events.
Oh, great. We will update our show notes with all that information. And when the second book comes out in September, you have an open invitation to come back and talk about it.
I'd love to join you.
Well, Edwin, we thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today.
Forward to meeting you in person at Mount.
Same here. And thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Okay, and you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Our next segment is going to be on Laura Thompson. We tried to connect with her via Skype, but we were having some difficulties. So Laura was gracious enough to answer some questions that we posed to her over the internet. So we're going to discuss her answers, and you'll get to learn a little bit about Laura when we answer the questions. Laura is another one of our nominees. She's in the category of nonfiction. She was nominated for Agatha Christie, A Mysterious Life.
When Laura received her nomination, she said she was amazed and honored and very grateful to the U.S. for this recognition. Laura did a lot of the research for the book at Greenway, Agatha Christie's home in Devon, and she met her daughter and was given total access to everything in the house. And Agatha kept everything. She found the love letters written by Archie Christie, childhood poems, jottings for her books and her old fur coats, her christening robe. It was very moving.
When we sent Laura the questions, we asked her how she got started in writing. I didn't yearn as a child to be a writer. In fact, a failed dancer, I fell into it. Really. In my 20s, when I started writing about gambling and horse racing, things that I enjoyed with my father, who left me a racehorse when he died, I supposed it drew people's attention at that time to have a young woman writing about traditional male subjects. And so my career began, at which point I realized that writing was, after all, what I was supposed to do. My mother always had a library of true crime books and detective fiction. I grew up fascinated as she was by murder. Indeed, I can hardly think of a more fascinating subject. Murder is human nature writ large, the end game of emotion. I'm most interested in domestic murder, not murder that is random psychopath, and in the tension between